I'm going to make an attempt to do the impossible and just make it as if it were a video I could put up on YouTube. But I'm beginning to understand religion. I'm not going to try to answer every aspect of the debate, but I do understand something now that I think about it. I was talking to one of my Catholic friend, and it wasn't really even a discussion about Catholicism, but it wasn't even a discussion. It was just a fact. I think she understands me a lot more because she'll ask, could you attend this or that ceremony? And yeah, I'll attend. But see, that's the thing. It's like for the first time, really, I kind of become aware of the fact that she realized that she has to actually ask if I would do it. And if I say no, you have to live with that. It's just that fact. You have to live with the fact that I say no. You can ask, well, Philip, would you please attend such and such a thing? And I say, yeah, sure, no problem. Or I might say, well, no, I have other things to do. Okay. Even if she don't like it, you have to kind of accept that sometimes you might not like what I do. But that's okay. You will have to live with it. You'll have to live with the fact that I'm not going to participate. Now, I think for some people, there is this thing. And this is where it's not... And it's the thing that's been on my mind since forever, really, that it's not purely a religious thing. But sometimes as an individual, just as an individual, you might want a safety and a comfort factor in knowing that everybody's part of this shared world. So that there is a we all must do things thought, or a we all must do things framework, of things. That there is, we all must pull together. We all must contribute. We all must give something. Instead of thinking, you know what, it would be nice if we all gave something. And let me ask people, would you help out with this, or could you help out with that? And in asking, I also acknowledge that it is possible you could say no. And if you say no, I have to deal with that. I have to accept that and not take any sanctions against you. That is, not deny you things that you have rights to, not punish you, not shun you, or say that I would never speak to you again, or unfriend you is the term they use in Facebook. But it's okay. I mean, it's okay. I'm disappointed, but that's it. That's about as far as it's going to go. I think that the one thing with a lot of people when we think about real religious fanatics, we can think of the more extreme things. We can think about the suicide bombers. We can think about the terrorists. But let's think of the less extreme things. Like people shunning you. Or even if they don't completely shun you, they just distance themselves from you. Or they, even before Facebook, they unfriend you. In the old days, people could unfriend you, but they didn't have to click a button. They just, all of a sudden they weren't as friendly. They weren't as nice. If you didn't go to, and I used to get this sometime, but not 100%. Maybe I was the only person who found a way around this without directly confronting or fighting people, but by actually creating my own sort of uniting force, by being a uniter of people, coming up with something. One thing that religion does on a tribal level, not on a universal level, but on a tribal level, it unites people in a tribe. There are many things, however, that unite people in a tribe. I mean, there's the religion, but what is the religion? It's the customs, it's the ceremonies, it's the things you participate in. Other things that unite people, of course, is a common language. See, I think that what, I'm not going to say I used to, but I think that what people had in the old days, and when I say the old days, I mean every day before this one, it could be 2 weeks ago or 20,000 years ago. What people had was everything was more local. I was talking to a friend at work, and we were talking about inventions of things, and a telephone and things like that. And would you be able to get along without a telephone, or would you get along without a toilet or whatever? And it occurred to me a thought about something, because I mentioned about, if we didn't have telephones back in the days when there weren't phones, there wasn't, things like automobiles. Basically, everything was really local, for real. Because you worked within the range that you could go. I mean, you might not work 20 miles away, or 10 miles away, or even 5 miles away. You lived and worked within walking distance most of the time, unless you could afford a horse. If you could afford a horse, or you could take a horse and carriage somewhere, or if you had, you could pay for your transportation somewhere. Basically, you worked close by. You worked within your neighborhood. You were walking distance for your job. In the old days, and maybe even in the older days than that, before there were horses, you really didn't even, your work and where you lived and everything else was all tied together. It was being in the tribe. And then things began to expand. First the finding animals that you could ride, horses, when somebody decided that was a possibility. And then when they came up with the trains, locomotives that can take you longer distances. Then the automobile. Now we got our own cars, more modern stuff, and public transportation. I get on an electric train that takes me, 15 miles or so from here to where I work. And so on and so forth. And some people, like when I was working in the other department, my boss, he actually worked like in another city. I mean, not worked in, he lived in another city. Not even city. It's like down in southern Illinois, and would commute just about every day by car. But, some people take the plane. Some people actually have jobs where they commute by plane every day. Hundreds of miles away. And now, of course, with all this electronic stuff, you could probably work at home, but, it just gets to be a lot of different things. The tribe, the whole definition of what is a tribe, what is a group, has changed. We still think as a tribe in local terms, but we live in a world that has ceased to be local in the most literal sense of it. It's not local anymore. It's become more universal, more expanded outward. Maybe, in some situations, and maybe even further into the future, it'll be that you'll be working in Chicago and your boss, your supervisor is in Kansas City, and the manager is in New York, and, your coworkers in Los Angeles and in San Antonio and up in some small town in Montana. The office party, has to be a like once a year thing where, people come to a conference for the conference plus the Christmas party. Who knows? Or we do a virtual party. However that works out. It's just interesting how our technology alters the reality of things. And I think that I want to get back into this religion thing. See, all the stuff of ceremonies, rituals, participating, common things we do, common language. Maybe one of your coworkers may be someone who doesn't speak a single word of English. And you don't speak a single word of, let's say, Japanese, or you don't speak a word of Spanish, but they're your coworker, and they work in a different country, and you work with them in some way. There are ways you communicate through some ways, it could be that way. We don't even need a common language anymore. See, we get to the point where we don't really need a common language. You know, and how come people aren't against the language? We don't need a common language. We don't need a common religion. We don't even need a common philosophy. The new philosophy becomes the philosophy of our work, of whatever it is we do. That thing which we've signed up for and are now participating in. It's just something to think about. It's a lot of interesting things. Technology changes everything. Where some things no longer become a need. It was a need at one time because it was just all mixed together. Simply by physical circumstances. But we no longer have that situation. We now have options. When you have options, things are no longer mandatory. It's no longer mandatory. You know, in the tribe, it's mandatory you participate in things. It's mandatory that you have to be a part of something. That maybe a tradition is passed on to you. Because your father did something, now you have to do it. Well, now it's an option. You don't have to. And it's only because circumstances made it where it's no longer necessary. You know, I'm always thinking about how everything changes because of technology, because of circumstances. Not only transportation, physical transportation, communication, you know, everything changes things. Facebook changes things. YouTube changes everything. I think, though, we always have that mind of the tribe. That sort of tribal mentality. We sort of still look for a tribe. I think religion is more tribal than it is spiritual. You know, spiritual is kind of like a byproduct of it. It's just something to think about. Stuff to think about. That's all. It's just, this is kind of a random, let's think about some things type of video. That's all. That's all I have to say.